What's up, everybody? Welcome to Overcoming Average. We are in quarantine mode still. I don't know how many weeks it is now, but probably 6 or 8 weeks. It's just a time zone, time warp. But today I have my neighbor and friend, Weston Arntsen. Every time I just got to make sure I get it right. So Weston is a life coach, and the only other person I know in my life with the name Weston, which is my brother's name. So it's crazy.
Small world.
I've never had two Westons in my cell phone until just a few months ago. So yeah, we talked the other day, and I invited you on the podcast. So thanks for coming on. And I just wanted to go over your life story. You know, how did you get here, and how did you become the person that you are? Struggles you've overcome. I hope that this podcast is something that will help people to improve themselves with anything. You know, whether you want to be a better runner, photographer, reader. Some things are just far gone from me. I'm terrible at spelling, and Kim tells me it's just too late. Something I should have learned probably 25 years ago. So, but yeah, thanks for coming on. So why don't we just start at the beginning, man? Tell us your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Should be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I grew up in Houston, Texas, a little suburb of it anyway, called Kingwood. Youngest of 6 kids, so kind of a big family. Yeah.
So my brother is the baby also.
Really?
Weston is the baby.
How old is he?
He turned 30 just in February.
Okay,
so,
that's cool.
So he's 7 years younger than me, but he's always been the baby in our family. So six kids, right? Boys, girls. What do we got?
So 4 boys, 2 girls.
Okay.
And are you the next youngest after him?
I'm the middle of 3. So I was the forgotten middle, is what they call us. But
that's what you call you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
I don't feel very forgotten. I feel great. So.
Yeah. Well, anyway, my sister, the next youngest in my family, so the 5th, she's 7 years my senior also.
Oh,
so
really?
Pretty
that
similar.
Is crazy.
It's a little weird, but I'm a little older than him.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was very fortunate, had a great childhood. My family is kind of like the kind of crazy, funny, musical family, known for that. My mom is like super right-brained, so smart and funny, life of the party. My dad is like incredibly musical and just a sweet, tender man. But his closet would be color coordinated, and my mom's would have, not quite that.
Yeah, the opposite of that.
Yeah. But just like a really good match for us kids to be able to have a lot of fun and see people who love to learn, love to laugh, and believed in us, which is cool. Couldn't ask for more, really.
Yeah.
Religious family, very Christian, and that is when you asked earlier, you know, why you are or who you are today or what made you you. It's just like, man, I guess it could all boil down to that, really. If you want to talk about all my struggles, it's like we could take all day, right? But,
yeah, for sure.
But, you know, I was thinking about your podcast, and I love it. I love the name, number one. You're welcome, yeah, because we all consider ourselves pretty average, usually.
Yeah.
But what we hope is that we have some potential to, like, at least do better than we have in the past. Just, like, kind of keep growing. But probably anyone who's listening, like me in your past episodes, it's like, how can this relate to me, whatever they're going through?
Yeah.
How can it help them? So hopefully something we say today is helpful in that regard.
It's helpful. Yeah, and not to derail too much, but it's easy for people to talk about what they're struggling with, but the real success story is the defeat of that particular thing. You know, we all struggle, and it's like, okay, wow, you've got a lot of really bad things in your life, but what I'd love to see is people that have overcome those things, people that are like, yeah, I went through that and I'm a better person for it today. Because I think that's a missing element of our society, is where people, they kind of, well, here's why I'm in a bad position in my life. Here's the list of all the problems that I've had. And we talked the other day when I was at your house about excuses and what that means. So yeah, take us back to your story. Like what again, when I say how did you get here, it's more what made you into the man you are today?
Thank you. Well, yeah, I think so. Being so much younger being basically only a child once I was like 10 or 11, even though I was in a big family, was nice for me to have kind of like a dichotomy of two different lives there. And with that, I just remember growing up, I hung out with adults a lot. I felt like I had a lot of friends, but like my mom's friends would come over, or I'd go home from school and like watch Oprah or like Dr. Phil with my mom and like sit on the bed and laugh. Yeah. My like kind of a weird kid, I guess. My favorite shows were always Nick at Night stuff.
Yeah.
So like when I got married, all of our friends pitched in and got me the box set of I Love Lucy.
I love it.
Pretty funny, but I do love it. So I always think that kind of contributed towards me wanting to be social in whatever I did. Yeah, I grew my hair out in high school. Well, I guess I got super sporty. I was really good at soccer. Really? And then all my siblings pretty much were kind of into soccer at one point or something similar, but then got into basketball, go Rockets.
Yes.
And then eventually, decided to like put up posters of the Beatles on my walls. And I think it was 10th grade, 9th or 10th grade, I got like electric guitar and did that, and played in a band in high school, played in a band in college. So loved that. But
so was there like a transition period from sports to music? Because I know for a lot of people, you're either one or the other. I know for me, I'm terrible at all sports, but I used to love baseball. And then one day I just kind of switched to music. So is that what happened to you, or how did that go?
That is so true. And it takes guts, actually.
Yeah.
A funny story about it, showing when I guess I had guts, but also was kind of a poser in a way. It's like I was at the basketball crowd, kind of like every day people would drive by and honk that knew my family or knew me at the same Green Tree Park where I grew up, right? And every day would be there, or Green Tree Elementary down the road, and like the skaters would be nearby skating and stuff. And like we know each other and friends, but like pretty distinct, do our own things. But then like, one day I'm like, I want to be like my older brother. I want to skate, which I think skating is very cool.
Yeah.
So I got a skateboard, and like one day I show up, literally different clothes. I go down with the skaters because I knew them, and I'm horrible in trying it. And all my friends on the basketball court are like, "What are you doing?"
You're
I'm
converting
like,
into
I'm like, well, I just want to try
skater.
this. Like, just let me try this, And I think it was probably 2 days. It might have only been 1 day, but 2 days later, I was back on the court. But I think that's actually good, is to have like a little bit of like, I don't know, just willingness to embarrass yourself and try something new.
Sure.
And
it can be painful too. I think of those layers in my life as almost like shedding a skin of like, well, I hit a point, and I was actually talking to one of our other neighbors, Molly, whose son plays for Clemson baseball, and he's a pitcher, and he's a young guy, and just he's totally into sports. But if you're a big sports guy, there is a line at some point where you're like, okay, I've got to make a decision here. I'm going to like push this to the next level and like invest money and time to play in higher level leagues to try to be seen and play professionally or even semi-pro, or am I just going to kind of let go? And I know for me, it was like, well, I'm getting close to graduating high school, and in the South, at least, there's no baseball after 18. You play softball in the church league,
Yeah.
So those
and it's way more competitive than it was.
Oh yeah, that's right. It is. But yeah, it's like shedding of a skin, where it's like it maybe even painful at times, where it's a realizing of, oh, this is kind of the old me, and it's going to have to go in a way. Maybe not forever. It's part of your past, but anyway, so back to you. So you were a soccer player, dabbled in skating. Can you skate now, by the way?
No.
Okay.
I just bought my kids some skateboards and humiliated myself a few times out there, but
so
we'll
what was it about music? You said you put up Beatles posters. So what was it that piqued your interest to get you into music?
So my sister, who I'm really close with, in fact, she lives here in Davidson, where we live. She's amazing. She and her husband were, I think, newlyweds, but they worked at a really cool summer camp up in the mountains of Utah. And I went, and I must have been 14, and I'd had a guitar already at this point, and I was into getting into music. I'd like listened to like just what your older siblings listen to.
Yeah, for sure.
Fortunately, my older siblings listen to really good music, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So they got me started out with like, REM and the Beatles and stuff. But I was up there, and I got I was with them for like a week. My parents had let me go up there, which was really exciting for me. And then I got like really bad fever. I don't know what it was, but I was sick. And so they would go out and be like a counselor. My sister taught pottery or some art classes to like these families each day. And so I was in like this tiny cabin that was like the size of this room, like, and it's not a lot of natural light, but I was just miserable. And so all they had was like this TV and VHS, and they had the Beatles anthologies, which if you are at all interested in the Beatles, you should look at those. Yeah. It's like 8 hours of documentary. It's amazing. But anyway, so they popped those in for me, and it just totally took me to another level of wanting to do that. I love all four of them.
That's awesome.
George Harrison, that was like... You're
a George guy?
I'm a George guy.
Really?
Yeah.
I've always been a Paul guy.
Paul's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's fascinating, their story. And I was just reminded the other day of how the Beatles music used to not be on iTunes. And I remember when it came out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a big deal.
Yeah, totally.
So you got into a music phase. So tell us about that. What'd you do with that?
Well, it's funny too. I think this theme of like even who I am today, because I was the youngest and I was, wanting to be liked by older siblings or hanging out with older people all the time. I was always the kid, like my sister's friends would come over and they're going to go out as like high schoolers, and I'm in 5th grade or 4th grade. And I would like cry, like, I want to go with you. And probably my mom and dad were like wanting some alone time. They're like, yeah, you got to take them, Megan. But I would just tag along, and, I apologized to her since profusely. She was so nice, but her friends were cool with it. But like just this whole idea of like trying to think about what I want to do at that point and seeing what's cool and what's not and what's helpful. And even now, like what I do for a living is like helping people see past the immediate moment and be like, hey, where do you want to go and what's going to be wise and how can you just do little things to get there? So my brother, who I was like, you worship your older brother. I'm sure the other Weston would agree.
Yep.
But he's 10 years older. It's not too late if he doesn't yet. We'll talk to him.
Yeah.
But my brother was in bands in his college years and stuff. So I formed one in high school. So it was just like me wanting to be bigger than I was at the time.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And I know the thing that a lot of people that are non-musicians, they see that as like, wow, I've always wanted to be in a band. And I know like a lot of older guys are like, I just wish I could play guitar. But we talked about that. Okay, well, what would you do with it though? Like, okay, so now you can play guitar. Let's wave the wand. You've got the skill. Now what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. And the next step is always join a band, and usually it leads in most people's minds, it leads to some like getting more chicks or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, so because we both have that skill. For me, I've seen a lot of the reflections of kind of who it made me with collaborating. I love the collaboration. And I like that you said, like, it makes you in some ways more than yourself because you've got like this group of people and you're collaborating, creating together, fighting over it. There's a lot of drama involved with it. A lot of people don't see behind the scenes. So you were in bands and stuff. Did you ever make albums, or did you do it for fun or play, or what did you do?
Yeah, we did. So yeah, most of those stereotypes that you would see about like a typical band, and there's like a leader, and then he's mad at the other. Like it's totally true.
Yes, it is.
And it's funny, and you all play your role. But I think it's what makes it, like you said, makes it sweet when you actually can get through that and make something together. And for me, like I taught guitar lessons to kids for a while, and I wouldn't mind picking it up again, actually. But I don't know music theory.
Yeah.
Whereas like some of my family does really well. But to me, it was all about feel and about an outlet.
Yep.
And not just like, oh, I'm so sad or mad, I need an outlet, although that happens. But it's just like any emotion, it helps you kind of just like really get in that rhythm. I don't know if it's the actual like physical reverberation of a restaurant, an instrument that you feel, but it just gets you in a mode. And then, yeah, if I picture George Harrison or like Django Reinhardt, you know who that is? Mm-hmm. Some consider him the best guitarist of all time. He's this like jazz guitarist from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. But he got in, some say it was like an accident or a house fire, and he burned 2 of his fingers. So I think it was these 2. So he could only use those 2, middle finger and index. And so he had to do things differently on a guitar. but if you listen to it and watch, he's still like so lightning fast and amazing. Oh, this guy from the 40s, and I'm just like a typical high schooler in a suburb in 2000. It's like I'm not near as cool as that, but I can like get into his music and figure out what he did, and I don't know, it's just something that's like kind of romantic and magical about it. So whenever I teach guitar to kids, I'm like, don't try to become the fastest, a shredder and do it to show off. Do it because it takes you somewhere else mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's productive, a good place.
Well, and you were talking about your sort of transformation from sports into music. And I remember those days too. I feel like they fade in time, but man, sometimes when you're younger, especially in that range of age, early teenage years, you'll hear a song and it just does, or at least back then. I don't know what it's going to be like with the modern technology where you can kind of flip through, but getting a CD was like a big deal.
Yes.
And you would just soak into that music. And there's something more to music than just the rhythm and the beat. Like I think there is something physical, because I'm sure you've probably heard a song that can almost make you cry and it has no lyrics. It's like, how does that happen? How can notes and strings and rhythm and timing form together make you have an emotion? And but then if you add on top of that a meaningful lyric, and I know you had talked about, and we can get into this later, about maybe doing a social media thing with like digging into some songs that have a deeper meaning, or they're encouraging, or maybe they're not. Maybe they make you want to do something bad or whatever. but they, people that are angry or, turning up the metal music, running down the road, it makes you want to speed,
Yeah, you don't drive slow doing that, huh?
There's just something about music. And actually, I wanted to go back to something you said about, I think that there's another guitar player, Phil Kagi, who's an excellent classical guitar player. And, there's all the rumors about Jimi Hendrix saying, oh, he was the best guitar player in the world or whatever. I think for me as a guitar player, the best it's hard to categorize, because it's like, well, is it the fastest? Is it the best sounding, the best tone, the most creative or whatever? Phil Kagi was missing a finger as well. And I think there's something about that, not only in music, but just anything in life, where like if you're presented with a challenge, you can rise to an occasion that otherwise would not have been there had you not been through that challenge. If you didn't have that missing finger, not to say I want to lose a finger to play guitar better,
right.
But it's going back to the challenge, the struggle that leads to something more beautiful. So back to your story. You were in bands. Where did you go after that? What was next in your life?
Yeah, and I just want to add on to that, or agree, is like when you find out this backstory about a musician or about a song, that's an Eric Clapton song, and figuring out what was going on and why he wrote that, or going back to the Beatles, like, oh, Help, like famous album, famous song, but it's like, oh, John was having a hard time dealing with fame, and he was gaining weight, and he was insecure about it because there's cameras on him all day. And he's like said later in an interview, he's like, I'm actually asking as a cry for help, literally.
Yeah. Wow.
But everyone's just tears and like, oh, you're so cool and stuff, which, I mean, it gives him some validation, obviously, but I think he wanted to talk about it or something. And so, I think music is amazing for that. But it makes it more meaningful. And this is instructive, like we're going to, when you find out that someone persevered through something, it just makes it all more meaningful and cool.
Yeah. And with music and musicians in particular, it is hard to see, especially, I don't know what it's going to be like in 15 years, but the musicians that we grew up with, you mentioned REM, and I think of like Soundgarden and all those. There's so many dead from drugs, and I don't know if it's the creativity that's in them, that a lot of creatives tend to be melancholy, sort of depressed people. They think a little bit different, but there's something inspiring about that, and it's sad to see some of those, especially that wave of the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of drug music, which I guess makes good music in a way. I don't know.
That's a catch-22, isn't it? It's true.
Yeah.
Like, so what you asked about, like part of my coaching, what I want to do is like a little side thing that'd be fun, is like I want to find one of my favorite rock songs or anything that has like a lyric or a message within it that really coincides with a really good coaching principle that we use, my clients and I to help kind of like illustrate something or live by. And one of the first ones that came to me after I got the idea is an album that was just recently released by one of my favorite musicians. His name is David Bazan, and he has a band called Pedro the Lion. Kind of a interesting name, cool name. But he's very transparent, both in his lyrics and just interviews about his whole process. And his particular process was he was raised in a super Christian home, became a Christian musician, then got pretty well known among like the indie rock scene or whatever, then doesn't know. My understanding of what he says is like he went through a real dark period where he actually didn't believe anymore, releases several albums, then he stops being Pedro the Lion, he just releases under his own name. Then does that for 15 years, I don't know, something like that. And then just randomly last year, all of a sudden there's a new Pedro the Lion album and everyone's like, oh my gosh. And he had come full circle and he's just like grasping his initial beliefs. But like, I don't know if there was any other way for him to get there, maybe or not. I'm not saying that he's now better or worse, but it's just like he's found more peace. One of the main songs he has on it is called Clean Up. And what's interesting is like, you think musician, artist, they need to be like, don't control them, don't try to do anything. However, there are some principles that I think benefit all of us to keep life a little more orderly and just happy.
Yeah.
And so one of his songs, Clean Up, is like talking about how like when he gets really overwhelmed and he says like, I've got like biblical weather coming down on me. He's just like freaking out. But then he says he remembers the gospel of clean up. And he's like saying, maybe talking about drugs in other sense. But really what he says is like cleaning up your space and gives your head a little bit more room to just realize, hey, I can do something good with my day. And if we don't, sometimes we clutter our lives with all sorts of things that aren't great.
Yeah, actually we're working through it right now, a couple of us guys, and I'd love to have you join us with this, but we've been reading 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. In the past, we're doing 2 chapters at a time, and then we just do a podcast and kind of review it. And cool. Unfortunately, the last time, since we're kind of in the coronavirus situation, only one guy could make it, but he talks a lot about order and chaos and that balance, where we kind of seek order, but you sort of need chaos to balance. Just like anything, like exercise is painful and it hurts, but you are better for it and you feel better, which sort of is sort of like, that doesn't really make sense, but it makes perfect sense at the same time.
Yep.
So yeah, sometimes people have to go. I'll take that back. I don't think sometimes. I think everybody has to go through something to become better. And if you don't ever struggle, how can you get better? How can you appreciate the better when you do get there? So not that I would welcome struggle, but I think seeing it as, okay, this is a tough time, but changing my outlook as this is a good time to learn maybe is the best way to handle it, because it's gonna come.
Yeah,
so
that's a great point. I mean, inherent in the word better, or if you want to use good or sweet, is this idea of comparison.
Yeah,
it's like a scale, and you have to taste the bitter to know what sweet even is. Otherwise, those words wouldn't exist.
Exactly.
Right? Now, then the key is, and as I'm raising kids, and they're still very young, my oldest is 8, but I'm like, okay, I do want to help them get to a point where they don't do too much of that. They don't have to touch the stove every day.
Right. Yeah.
I remember a 2-year-old touched the stove and burned his hand really bad, went to the emergency room, and it was so sad. And I've just thought, he now knows, though, that's what we don't do. But I hope he doesn't do it over and over.
Right.
Because sometimes you can't let it heal, and it could lead to other things. So there's a lot in there, and I'm still trying to figure it all out. But
yeah, so going back to the musicians, that's what I think is unfortunate, is maybe they didn't make it through the full cycle to learn from their mistakes. It's like something got to them and they, commit suicide or they overdose or something. It's just sad to see that. I love to see those people coming back. Pedro the Lion, that's a great story. And I look forward to more. I know with Hillsong, there was a guy recently who just said, I don't know about any of this stuff anymore. basically, at least for now, he's kind of, and he was one of the biggest songwriters there. He just kind of threw it out the window. I was like, I don't think I believe any of this stuff anymore. And maybe it's due to bad doctrine. I don't know. Cause there's a lot of that out there, but, especially when you see those musicians that have such power and impact to make these songs and help other people, I hate to see, people dip down and never come back out of it, so, but yeah. So back to you. So what happens after the musician phase? Well, let me ask you this. How did that end? Or did it ever end?
Yeah. Well, let's see. I got married before I was 24 when I was married.
Okay.
And so all the other guys, they were not yet. And then we didn't expect it, but a year later we had our first daughter. So
wow.
When not extremely rich at that point, still not, right?
Yeah.
I'm being facetious, but like really we just kind of poor, struggling young newlyweds and stuff. And so I had to sell all my stuff basically, long story short. But my wife was really supportive. She loves that I have music, but it just couldn't make it all work. I was like working during the day, I was going to school during the day, and then I worked at night at a ski resort, and then take care of the baby and stuff. It just doesn't really.
Yeah, priorities change pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so you talked about, and I know that you worked in the hotel industry, but tell us how you kind of got there, because I think that's a fascinating. That's an interesting story.
Yeah, isn't it so funny? Maybe someone who's listening, it's like they have something that they're known for, whether it's like just a hobby or a career or place. I don't know, anything, right? But I never once thought of hotels in my life.
Yeah.
And then, I'm 23 and in a band, and the bassist is like, "Hey, I need a job, and I need one at night, and I don't really want to wait tables. It just wasn't what I wanted to do." And so he's like, "Well, you can come be a bellman," which is like.
So you took a job on the recommendation of a bassist. That's pretty
very risky. Yeah, I should have gone with like a drummer's recommendation.
That's right.
No, but he worked up there, and so it was really interesting. I was studying business management with like a marketing emphasis in college at the time, and I got a lot of typical people in my church because we go on like a 2-year mission, so we get started on college a little bit later. But anyway, I worked there for 2 weeks as a bellman, taking people's luggage up, and the way that place is like it's a bunch of luxury, beautiful cabins up on this mountain away from the kind of hub of the resort. And so I would actually like drive them, or they would follow me in their car up to their cabin, and then I'd take them in and show them around and show them how to work the AC, and they'd give me a nice tip, and I'd meet people from all over the world, a lot of celebrities.
Now, where was this again?
Utah.
This was in Utah.
This is called Sundance
I've
Resort.
never been to Utah, but I hear it's beautiful.
Oh man. I mean, I grew up in Texas and I loved it. Super green, totally flat. And then Utah is just these majestic mountains. And like the town I lived in there in Provo, it's like literally on the bench of the mountain.
Wow.
Your backyard is just straight up.
That's awesome.
It's cool. But anyway, so I did that and then just switched my major within 2 weeks to be hospitality management.
Really?
Yeah, I just knew, it just felt right. And I loved the idea of like, I can always be in a beautiful place if I do resorts or hotels,
That's
even
true.
like a nice building. I get to meet new people every day because they're checking in and out.
Yep.
And then people were giving me their numbers and like, if you're ever in New York or if you're ever in LA or wherever, we want you to come see us. And it was just cool for me. I love the idea of being connected to people.
Yeah.
And so, but then one day during a class, there was like a slideshow or a professor there at my college, like talked about this place that had just opened called Amangiri. And it's a ultra luxury is what they call it, a hotel brand, resort brand that's based out of Thailand. And they have, at the time, like 28, 30 properties. And they are known for being extremely exclusive. Like they don't spend any money on like typical marketing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you just have to know type thing. But they built one down right next to Lake Powell at the Utah-Arizona border, which is really cool. Do you know what Lake Powell is?
No.
Okay. Imagine if they just filled the Grand Canyon with water, like 2/3 of the way full or 3/4. That's what it looks like.
Wow.
And this it's called the Glen Canyon, but then they put a dam up and filled it up with water. Decades ago. So beautiful. And just out in the middle of the desert. Just looks like Mars there, basically.
Yeah.
It's very different looking. It's this 34-room resort with like a minimum of $1,500 a night.
Wow.
Up to $10,000 a night.
34 rooms.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Tiny.
So this is not the Hampton Inn $99 special.
No, it wasn't. You like go to this. You have to be given directions after you actually pay. Pay everything up front ahead of time. But like you get to this gate, barbed wire fence, nondescript little speaker box. You push it, and then it was me eventually when I worked there, saying like, "Welcome to Amangiri. May I have your name, please?" And they would say it, and if they were on the manifest, and you'd push a button, it would open it up, and then they had a 5-minute drive through this incredible terrain to get there. And the general manager, and anyone who could be there, we might be 6 of us, we would be there waiting at this circle drive there in the mountains on the steps of the resort, and with like a sage lemonade and a cool towel, and just like roll out the red carpet.
That's awesome. So did you ever, I assume you met people famous or people that have big jobs or something there? Yeah, because I've never heard of that brand, but obviously I wouldn't know about it. But
that's not obvious. No. Yeah. So there's 30 properties, people who go. In fact, we would have it, like we'd try to figure out everything we can about you before you arrive.
Okay.
So the first way is just asking you, right? But then if you are famous or someone like that's well known, we could look up online and see if there's any interviews about you. If you love Diet Pepsi, we want to know that. And so we're going to stock your room with Diet Pepsi, right? Without having you even thinking about it. Or if you're there and we notice that you keep like in your trash every day, there's a bunch of Diet Pepsi, then we know you like it. We write it down, and at any Amman you ever go to again, we will do that unless you tell us otherwise. I mean, and all the luxury brands do this. Four Seasons or Ritz-Carlton, they know the temperature you like and they try. It takes a lot of work to make sure every team member actually follows the notes that you meticulously take. But to answer your question, tons of celebrities and famous business people. I mean, one of my favorite stories, and it's been long enough to where I don't think it's, bad for me to say, but I get teased. I'm like a bit of an Apple fanboy now.
Yep.
And I just have like most of my IT or tech stuff is Apple just because I like how it's all works together. But I like other companies. But anyway, at that resort, there were 2 hikes that were guided every day, complimentary. And they're beautiful. They go out and you literally are looking at like petroglyphs that are thousands of years old that were made on these cliffs, right? And so we had these partners that were like contracted guides that would come and do it. So one of them was just she was a real fiery girl, and she took out she would take out a group, anyone who was there at the front desk at 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. But on this one, it was just like one guy that showed up. So she took him out, gone for 45 minutes or an hour. And she said, she comes back and he walks away. I know who he is. She didn't, but she's like, comes up to me and she's like, "Who is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, why?" And she's like, "Well, it's just this guy." And the whole time he's on his iPhone. There's nothing more frustrating that you are here in this nature and you just still can't get away. And she said, she told the story. She's like, I was out there and asked him, "What are you doing? Are you on your iPhone?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. I just really can't get away. It's kind of an important week. I can't fully be detached, but I'm really sorry. I am listening." And she's like, "Oh, Apple, huh?" She's like, "I hate Apple." She's like, everything that's bad about this world or something. She's just very extreme in what she says. And she just said he kept laughing and laughing. And, so she was asking me who he was. I'm like, "Oh, that's Tim Cook. He's the CEO of Apple." So she felt really bad, but he was a really good sport about it. So there's like just stuff and then celebrities, and you just realize like, man, they're trying to escape the pressure like anybody is on vacation.
I bet in a way he probably appreciated that. He probably gets a kick out of it,
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm obviously a big Apple person. The company does Apple work, but if anybody's like, "Oh, I'm an Android person," I'm like, "Well, that's cool." I mean, I don't care what you use, but yeah, I'm sure Tim Cook and Steve Jobs probably would have had a cow. He probably would have probably hired her to make her use an iPhone and then fired her or something. But
it's true. I mean, I was able to take around. I met Mark Zuckerberg.
Wow.
Yeah, this is different places, but Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google and stuff, and like these are just really nice, normal people.
Yeah.
And they wanted to get to know where I was from, and knew we had some things in common. And it's just like, it was cool to see that and kind of demystify things.
For sure.
So
yeah, it's I'm from North Carolina, and the celebrities that we have around here, they're like race car drivers, bankers. I remember a guy came to my old office, and he just knocked on the door, and he was wearing a nice suit. He had a really nice Porsche, and he just came in. Hey guys, I just got back from Argentina and my duck hunting photos. I just need to make sure they're backed up and whatever. So I was like, who is this guy? And he was like one of the, I can't recall his name, because in Charlotte, like, I mean, what's a big bank executive? Like, they're not famous. They're famous in that world, but this guy was worth like, I don't know, billions. You know, he just walked up, real nice guy. But yeah, it's funny that you see people like that, and you have to wonder about their journey. Like, man, how did they get to this point? And a lot of times, there's a good bit of struggle, but sometimes they're just nice people, and they just are business savvy. Sometimes they're maybe a little disconnected with maybe the normal world, because they're just real focused on what they do. But yeah, I think that's good. It's good to be around those type of people and see how they operate.
Yeah. And you can tell, and they would say it takes work to still stay grounded, because you like their kids, and you talk to their kids, like 4 seasons is not a treat for them. That's the norm.
Yeah.
So when you do go somewhere that doesn't offer that type of, like, we call it anticipatory service, right?
Yeah.
No one's actually like just really thinking of how they can help you. It's just more of like a reactive, like, I'm at the desk if you need me, Hampton Inn type thing, which is fine. And it's a great product. It's just different.
Yeah.
Then they're frustrated. And it's just like,
oh yeah.
So it's kind of it can be a handicap to have to grow up with that. But like, for example, I remember Gordon Ramsay, meeting him, and like my friends who are like the cooks and the chefs, they got to cook for Gordon Ramsay, and he sat up at the chef's counter, and just like, they were so nervous.
Oh,
but afterwards he was like so like complimentary of them, and said how great the food was. He ate every bit, and it's just like, they'll never forget that.
Oh, wow.
And his TV persona is quite different.
Oh, sure. Yeah. He turns it on.
Yeah. He's nothing like that.
Yeah.
And just, there's so many, I could go on and on, but you realize that these are good people.
So no powdered eggs there, I guess, for
not at that place. Yeah. The employee cafeteria.
Yeah. That's right. The employees get treated different.
No, they didn't either, actually.
So where'd you go from there? So that was in Utah at the edge of Arizona, you said? Okay.
Yeah. I lived in Arizona, worked in Utah. So then went up to Park City, Utah, Montage, which is a Deer Valley. If anyone's been there, incredible skiing, gorgeous, same type of thing, just clientele, crazy, beautiful place. But anyway, I ended up getting, when I was at that resort I told you about, I had a guest who pulled me aside one day and said, hey, we want you to come work for us. We're building a hotel across the country. And very kind, and they kept in touch with me. So I ended up going out and running a hotel in Mississippi, and it was just a hole in the ground when I got there. The managing director that I worked under, he and I were there for a couple of years before it even opened.
Really?
But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting choosing every fork and bed sheet, and what kind of uniforms you want the employees to wear, what kind of software, computers, the flow of a check-in, what does it look like? So it was so fun and gratifying. And after 5 years of that, it's been open now since March of 2017. Amazing ownership, amazing employees. But I knew that I wanted to do something different. Yeah. And so I'm like, what is all the good that I love about that job? And what could I do that would get me with my family more? Because hotels are open 24/7.
Yeah.
365.
So you were there from the ground up, literally.
Yeah.
That's crazy. In Mississippi, I've always thought that was odd, like a high class hotel in Mississippi. No offense to anybody in Mississippi, but I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah, Mississippi and the Deep South, it's like they love what they have going on there, and they are very tight knit. They're incredible people. They're the nicest people in the world. But they don't. I'm generalizing, of course, but like, we lived in a really nice small college town where Ole Miss is, and it's just like, it's about tradition, and they do tradition better than anybody.
Yeah.
They honor their families, and they have so much respect for those who've come before them, and they just keep it going. to their credit in a lot of ways. I'm more of like a Westerner where I like the idea of innovation and trying something new. So I kind of learned from them and hopefully presented something different that they kind of ended up liking, which I think they do. But
so what were some of the choices that you guys made in that hotel that aligned with that tradition? Because I assume you kind of customized it for the region, right?
Yeah, we did. Just the whole architecture, even though it was brand new, people would say it looked like an old building, which is, you choose the brick color and all the architecture to be like that. So it was nice to hear. But we tried to do things like, for example, when you check in anybody, we print out your name on stationery and put it in the room. So when you get in and look on the desk, it's like this really nice piece of high-end stationery with your name on it. It says like in residence and the dates that you're there. So then you can send postcards or letters to people and we'll mail them for you at no charge.
Yeah.
It just kind of gives you an idea of like, we know you, you're here, you're staying in this like kind of old mansion. It looks like there's 38 rooms. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was like one of the ways we tried to implement.
Sure. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So what happened after that? Is that when you decided to step out on your own?
Yeah. So it was a year ago basically. And, I just felt like, I wanted to get more time with my family. And honestly, I told the ownership there too, like, hey, I think there's a reason that hotel GMs, 2 years is the average, 2.5 years is the average tenure in luxury hotel world. Cause you just need new ideas. And I'm like, I gave this thing everything I got and got it to a certain place. And I think it's time for someone else to build on that. So it was the right time. And, my wife has been listening and kind of doing coaching type stuff for 2 or 3 years, just like podcasts, and she's a yoga instructor. So she's just into self-development in that way. Yeah. And she's always been telling me, hey, you should listen to this thing or read this book. And I was well-intentioned, like, yeah, that sounds good. But I was just too focused on what I was doing, maybe, I don't know. And then once it was like, okay, I'm ready to move on, I tried it out and I just went home one day and said, oh, I'm going to be a life coach. And she was like, yeah, I'm so excited. She wanted me to do that, which is really nice to have a partner who supports you and sees your strength.
Absolutely. So you made that decision. Did you already have some clients at the time, or was it a total you had
Not
to
at
cut?
that time.
Okay. So you cut the cord, started your own thing. How did you approach getting those clients? And then we'll talk more about what you actually do with that and everything.
Sure. Thanks for asking, actually. So no, when I told her that, I did not have clients, but then I still worked there. I gave them a lot of notice because I knew that they were going to want to figure out like big picture, what they wanted to do, the owners. And so after I gave them notice, I still worked there for 6 months.
Okay.
So yeah, during that time, I would go into the office extra early and just kind of do my stuff. And I did get clients on the side and enjoyed it. And honestly, the reason that kind of was open to it and did it is because that was always my managing style anyway. There's different types of managers out there, and mine was definitely a coaching style where I didn't get to be with the guest like I was when I was a front desk agent or a supervisor. Okay. So my job was to take care of the employees and really take care of the managers. So if I could help them to see what they were capable of and lend their unique talents to our purpose, then they would go down and do the same thing with their employees. It just trickles down, and then the employees would do it with the guest, give it their best, rather than just being like, these are the rules, do it.
Do you think brands, Starbucks, Chick-fil-A, Apple, do you think that management style is in place in most of those places? The top down?
I do. I think the only way you can get something that big and still be consistent is if you empower the employees to say, we need you to do what you do.
Yeah.
Even like Apple, they have like a genius bar, right?
Yep.
At their stores. So you are basically calling the people who run it a genius in a way. And so they feel like, hey, Apple thinks I'm smart. I'm capable of doing this.
That's definitely true. Yeah. And sometimes I'm skeptical, but you can't deny the truth. I mean, you can't deny that Chick-fil-A has outstanding customer service. Everybody. And it's hard to see that because you think surely there's a bad apple in here, but it seems like either they hide them or they fire them or something because everybody at Chick-fil-A is super helpful. And you're right. The people at Apple, they're treated well. They're at least respected in some regard. I've never worked at the Apple store, so I can't speak to that. But you take another company, and I won't mention any that are bad, but we all know some that you're like, man, every time I go here, I'm going to order a sandwich and it's going to be wrong, and they're going to not even look at me and throw the bag at me or whatever. Like, it's just a different from the top down, I think, cultural shift. So you took that management piece from the hotel, and then you basically said, I'm already doing this for a group of people, for a team. Can I convert that into coaching for individuals, right?
Yeah. And here's a good example. If we ever got a bad review at the hotel or the restaurant, I knew it was my fault. And I wasn't saying that just to sound like, oh, I'm being a good manager. Like, I really did know this is my weakness. And the weaknesses of that company were my weaknesses, because I don't drink, so I don't know wine or alcohol, and I didn't put a lot of therefore skill into like the marketing of that or like pairing of it. I had an amazing executive chef and restaurant manager and bartenders. It wasn't that, but it's just that I didn't know, and I should have developed that more. But like, if we did get a bad review, I took responsibility, and I would say to the employee, like, I'm so sorry I didn't prepare you for that, or to the manager. At least that's what I tried to do. So then we had this story that I found, and it was 2 pages, and I would make every employee read it and sign off that they read it. And then at one point when I found it, and then every new employee had to read it. And it was a story called 100% Responsibility. And I'm going to condense it to a super short version, but there's a company, they make day planners and like, kind of like organizational supplies, and they do seminars. And basically there was a lot of different moving parts, but when, if you were working for them and you were the one actually going to do a seminar to a big corporation that had hired you and paid you $1 million account, right, to be like their trainers, and you show up the day to do it, and you mailed ahead all of your supplies to give them their workbooks and everything, and they weren't there, you look really bad, and the customer doesn't get the value. So then that happened, and so then there's these different components. And so when the managers or the corporate executives like went in and talked to the employees who were in charge of a certain part of it, right, packing the materials, they would always say, well, it wasn't our fault. Like the UPS did this, or it wasn't our fault because the people who, the supplying partner, they must have messed that up. We did our part. And the guy was like, he noticed it was just never their fault.
Yeah.
And they had legitimate reasons, and you could tell they believed it. But so he said, hey, he came up with a bonus system. It's pretty interesting. But he's like, you'll get $1 for every single order that you do right. And if you do every one of them right with no mistakes for the month, you get an extra bonus of like $500 or something, like a big one. If you make one mistake, then you will still get some of the bonus, like a little bit smaller. But if you make a third mistake, you get nothing.
Wow.
Even if it's not your fault, right?
Yeah.
And so they were like, well, that's not fair, because what if it's this other company? Like, we can't control UPS, whatever. But he was trying to teach them, like, if you take 100% ownership, you will find a way to have a safety net. So instead of shipping everything, and it was supposed to get there, 4 days prior to you getting there to give the thing, they would do it now 10 days prior. And it's just like, that way UPS messes up, it doesn't matter, because they find out and they emergency ship something or drive it there.
Right.
There's always a backup plan. So that was something we tried to instill. You have to foresee things that could happen and just control as much as you can and not be a victim. And that is very empowering.
Absolutely.
So I do try to help that with my clients.
Yeah. Incentive's tough. I feel like culture's shifting to where money's not always the incentive anymore. Maybe with the coronavirus and people not having jobs, it'll shift back to being money, but not that that's good or bad. It's just, I think for the first time in, I think since the 60s or something, that the number one desire of people out of college is not money, but culture. They want a job that they have good culture, which I think is an interesting thing. It's like, well, what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that lunch is catered at work? Because some people see, wow, that's a really cool job. And I've had the pleasure of working at some of these companies. No offense against them, but when there's no reason to leave, they have breakfast there and coffee all day. Lunch is catered by professional chefs, and there's snacks, and there's unlimited drinks, water, soda, whatever you want all day long. And then there's a open bar at the end of the day. For a young person who's single, they'll work 100 hours a week and not even notice it. So,
True.
but some of those companies, they have the appearance of good culture. I think that's a strange definition of a job that we probably need to look at some point in our life and say, is that really what I want out of that? So, but so speaking of jobs, so you're now a life coach, and actually I went over this week and had a session with you, which was great. And just from my experience, I think it was helpful because you and I talked afterwards, and even some before. When I started the company, I started meeting coaches, and honestly, I had never paid attention before. I never knew that people were business coaches, life coaches, or any of that sort of thing before. And so there's definitely, on my part, some skepticism, like, coach, what's that mean? Like, how can you be a life coach? How can you be? I actually saw somebody post they're starting a new business as a spiritual coach. I thought, okay, some of them were definitely interesting, but just in that session that we did, it was great just to see. It was and I think I told you too, I tried to go in with the intentional, like, I'm going to shut my phone off. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to try to focus a little bit. And, selfishly, it's nice. Like, okay, we're going to talk about like what I want to do, my directions and my goals for a little while. And I told you afterwards, that for me, I've always kind of thought, well, what's the difference in a coach and just a good friend? And I think your response was good, that it is that intentionality, that it's just, there's no buy-in from your friend. Like, hey, look, I got to go to dinner. So the conversation's over. Maybe there's a little lack of focus. Maybe it shifts from him to you to somebody else. And it's not as an intentional, but, from your perspective, you tell me, like, what is somebody going to get out of working with you? You're their coach. What are they going to get? What's the buy-in for them? What's the value?
Yeah. Do what they can. Do the things that you deep down know you can, but whatever limit you've got on yourself or some belief that you shouldn't go for that, I'd feel guilty trying to get to be that level, or it's not realistic, or I'm just not good enough, or my spouse or my kids won't let me, or my circumstances, anything. We've all got things that we place on ourselves that just aren't real. They're totally in our mind, and it doesn't have to always be about like, oh, I'm bigger, or I'm more famous, or I have more money. It can be, I want a better relationship with someone, or I want a better relationship with myself, or I want to get a better have better health, whatever's important to you, that you haven't been able to do yet. And fortunately is, like, I'm not a consultant that says like I could go be a hotel consultant. I could help hotels open because I've done it and I'm good at it.
Yeah.
But I don't. I'm fortunately, I'm not experienced in whatever it is that you're trying to do, because I've never been you.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to ask the questions and be bold about it, and bring up the things that probably no one else makes you bring up.
Sure.
To be vulnerable and to talk about what you're scared of, and just give you a very safe place where, like, I'm going to really let you search deep. I heard one coach when I was thinking about doing it, and he always pictures himself as Sherlock Holmes at the beginning of every session. He doesn't tell him that, but he's just like, I'm here to just like dig and like get my magnifying glass out and be like, hold up a mirror and say, what is going on in your life? And my first call I ever did with anyone was a stranger. I never talked to her, never heard of her. She contacted me. She lived in Wisconsin. Super nice. Talked for 2 hours. And at the end of it, she was like, this has been transformational for me. And I'm just like, this is my first one. I was so nervous. But I knew, luckily, I'd been taught well in the books that I'd read and the people that I trusted and went to. It's like, it's not about you, Weston. It's just not. If it was, then yeah, you need to go get a doctorate degree and do all this. But if you can care and you know how to read people and you know how to show love, but also be bold and ask the questions, people can do amazing things. It's in the client. It's not in me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you said a couple things there that I think for me have been confusing about coaching. Like in a specific world, it's like, you said the word consultant. So it's like, all right, if I really needed help with like, hey, how do I, for me, it would be, how do I do better at marketing, or how can I get more customers with customer service or something? Maybe I'm going to go to an IT company consultant. Like there's a few people in the world that they're like, they pitch themselves as like, we can help your IT company grow. So that would be like a consultant. So it feels like you dabble in that, but you're saying, okay, I'm not the IT growth company expert. Like you don't claim to know that. So if I'm coming to you as a client and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm starting a tennis shoe business, you're not going to be the guy that knows everything about shoes. It's not your goal. So therefore you're saying like, I didn't open 10 sneaker stores and that's why you're hiring me, because that's the job of a consultant.
Right.
But on the other side, there's a huge psychological element to it as well, which I think almost feels like a psychologist or somebody that's like digging into your mind a little bit. So what's the difference? Where is that? Is that a good description of the blend of like a consultant and a psychiatrist, like somewhere in the middle there, or?
Yeah, I think if it's helpful to blend things, then great. But I think it's just a different thing. But like therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists, like if you need medication, and some people do, I can't help you. You need to go to a psychiatrist. If you need to like unravel some serious like things that have happened to you in your past, trauma, you need to go to a psychologist. I can't help you. I'm about your future, but whatever's happened in your past leads to you thinking the way you do, and you just think certain ways that just aren't fact.
Yeah.
And so we just say, well, I can't do the X because of Y, and I'm just like here to challenge that. It's like, why on earth?
Yeah.
Who's stopping you, and why is it bad? Why are you threatened that someone else has success? Does that really put a limit on you? For example, that's a common one. So yeah, coaching is about the future, but it is all about mindset. Now I will then, after we can get some things straight and help them see themselves and their potential clearly, I am good at helping them get some tools if they don't have them yet, about like how to get organized and set goals and make a plan. But you can't go there until they see how good they really are.
Right. Yeah. One of the tools that you gave me, I've been thinking about it a lot since we met, but I was talking about the circumstance, and I can't remember the book, but circumstance leads to a thought. The thought leads to a feeling. The feeling leads to an action, and the action gives a result.
Nice memory.
And we can't change the circumstance. The circumstance is, I think you said something that's proven by law. Like the circumstance is my car's broken down. I'm on the side of the road. That's a fact. We can take a picture of that.
Yeah, it could be proven in a court of law. Yeah.
Right.
No opinion.
So when I have the broken down car, it leads me to think about something or think a certain way, I guess you would say. And then that makes me feel a certain way. And then that makes me inevitably take some sort of an action, and then I get a result, right? So is that the formula? And what I took away from it was if you can start at the top and change your thought, because you can't change the consequence, or not the consequence, the circumstance, you can change the path of the result. Is that fair?
Totally.
So a question I had as I was pondering that, can you change it, in your opinion, at any point in that process? So like, let's say you have a thought with a bad feeling, but you choose a different action, a better action. Will that end up in a better result? Or is it basically like it always starts with the thought process?
Yeah, it always does. It can be very quick. So when you think you're just changing an action, you just very quickly changed your mind about something and had the confidence to actually change your action. I mean, our brain literally, you can't move your hand without having a brain send an impulse first.
Wow.
And that's a shout out to, this is Brooke Castillo. She's someone I'd read about, and she developed this thought model. But yeah, it's a good tool because it can be applied anywhere. It's helpful. It's so empowering to know like people with incredible tragedy in life can still find peace and joy and contentment. And or they could find total misery and bitterness. And what's the difference? Because the exact same circumstances happened. And it is mindset. And I think that doesn't mean that you're supposed to always be happy, because negative emotion is just, it's got to be there. It's part of life, and it's actually instructive and helpful, and it can be a way to process. But if you can do one of two things, I think I told you actually, but Steve Chandler, another great coach, author, he said, we're always working on one of two languages, where you're either becoming more fluent at victimese, being a victim to your circumstance, or ownish, which would be I own what happens to me regardless of my circumstance. And if you can really firmly cement into your mind, I am a good person with like limitless capabilities, and I'm choosing to do this with my life, and I'm bringing value, and people love me and I love people, then when little circumstances you can't control pop up, you view them as like a quick detour, not Mount Everest in front of you and like proof that everything's wrong.
Yeah, that's great. And for me, I think it was just, my thought was I have to practice that thought model like exercise, like a muscle, and just get used to it. Because I think at the end we discussed like, how do we take this to our day-to-day life and like parent better with it, or respond to a difficult situation better with it, and always be on. I don't think it's possible to always be on, but to say, gosh, this is a tough situation. The kids are jumping on me. I'm trying to send an email or whatever, to go back and readjust our thoughts, because we can't change that circumstance, but we can change, okay, how am I going to view this? I don't want to damage my kids by yelling at them, hey, get out of here. Dad's trying to work, but at the same time, I do have a job and I'm trying to take care of my clients, which ultimately will make my kids have a better life because they have a roof over their head. But it's just okay, can I compromise in that thought process? And I'm glad you brought up the speed, because I kept thinking too, like, I wonder if, you could hack the system and kind of like, okay, I feel bad, but I'm going to take an action anyway. But that is a changing of the thought process. Absolutely. That's good.
Totally. And the more you practice it, like it's so simple, but like the idea of working out a muscle, the more you practice it, it's like, the first time you go running, it's going to be a 10-minute mile, if you can even make it a mile.
Yeah. And or for me, like 12 and a half minute mile.
Yeah. Well, me too. And so it's like you hate running that day, and you just tell yourself, I am not a runner. Like some people, but I'm not it, and I hate it. And then if you can just have some accountability or some reason why you try it again and do it 4 times, and all of a sudden it's a 9-minute mile and you're not as out of breath and you don't have that rage in you, even though it's still hard. And then all of a sudden, like, you're just a runner. And no one was just a runner magically. It's just they chose to do it. Whoever's listening, what do you really want? That's what I would ask you, right? And there's ways for me to help draw that out, because sometimes you don't even really know. It's not the thing that's on the surface. It's something you've buried down. And
that's a tough question when you ask what somebody really wants. Like, I know for me, I had to think about it for a little while, because there's the default answers, and sometimes maybe that is the answer, but sometimes you have to think, what do I actually want? What would make me happy? And I think we talked about too the mindset of thinking out what that result might be. Like, instead of going small with the time, instead of fast, if we think about it over time, like, if I think about this, what's going to be the result in 5 years or 10 years? And that's huge, because a lot of times our human impulses or our selfish desires, you think that process out and think about those actions and think about the results, and you think, wow, that's not the life that I want to live. For
true.
Sure. And it's hard, because in the moment you think, oh, this is going to be good, and I'm going to make this decision. But the good news is, I guess we can always pivot, as long as we're taking those, making the better choices in the short term over and over and over again. The long term will hopefully be more aligned with what we actually want. And so making those little choices of, okay, I want to eat this bad food, but I know it's probably not best for us. So you make that little choice over and over again, and then you have better eating habits eventually.
Yeah, that's huge. And when I coach someone on food, for example, what I would do, and I'm in the same boat as you, so I'm not trying to say it from higher ground, but it's like, why is food bad?
Right.
The whole way that we approach things is like, oh, this is bad food, this is good food, and I like bad food, and I wish I shouldn't like it. You are set up for defeat because there's no such thing as bad food. There just really isn't. Food's neutral. It's just a thing. You can say something is more nutritional or something will give me a different result that I want.
Right.
But you've got to take that pressure of bad and good off of it and reapproach it differently, and then say, why do I even want to have nutrition? What is it that I really want? Oh, because I want this. And if you can just unscramble it all, start fresh, and focus on tiny little things that add up over time, stuff sticks. Otherwise, you're in the New Year's resolution group.
Yeah, I don't want to say I never do New Year's resolutions, but I sort of stopped doing them a few years ago. And I might do goal setting, but I personally tend to do them in the spring. For me, I just am like, March, April, May. At some point, it feels like, things are starting to, we know summer's coming or whatever. Just set the goals. Just so that I'm not in January, but I've found that that's worked out okay for me. But also the continual reviewing of those goals, because it's funny, when I was talking to you the other day, I kept thinking, man, I've gone over some of these goals and I have the answers to some of the questions literally written down. I couldn't find them. Then it makes me think, okay, I think it's time to review the goals again. But for me, I'm going to pat myself on the back for a second, but I love when I do go back to my goal list, because I have like the big one and then I have kind of the daily goals that I try to achieve. When I go back to that big 1, 5, 15-year goal plan sort of for my life, which always deviates. Sometimes I go back and think, wow, look at this. I've achieved all these things just because I put it in my mind of like, I want to do this thing. A lot of times they end up happening for me. They happen faster. It's like sometimes I'm starting to hit my 5-year goals in the first year. So then I think, should have set bigger goals.
Well, I think there's a big part of it. People who feel good about themselves produce good results. That's what I've heard in a book I read called The 1 Minute Manager. And it's so true. That's why placebo is a thing. It's like, if you can get someone to think, like, if I told you, hey, by the way, Chad, like, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but in a year from now, like you land $1 billion client.
Yeah.
And everything you're doing, like, is just right. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. You would have a confidence come over to you that would allow you to free yourself up and be more bold. Now, certainly, I wouldn't tell you like, oh, you don't have to do anything. It's just going to land in your lap. But like, if I said, if you just keep on your same course and use your skills, this is what's going to happen. It just frees you up and you actually do better work. You bring people more value. You have less insecurity getting in the way. Dorothy Brand, I think it was, she's like, act as if it were impossible to fail. So if you had no fear and there's no way you could fail, what would you do? And it's like, well, I guess I would stop being scared and I would actually go do that Facebook Live thing, or I would call up this client and say, like, I would love to coach you.
Yeah.
But we don't do it because we're scared of something. Sometimes we don't even know what.
Yeah. And we were talking on the porch the other day about something that I respect about people that I respect, I guess, in Gary Vee, whatever. And I brought up that Gary Vee in particular, he just doesn't really care. He's fearless. He doesn't care what people think about him on Facebook, but he's kind of been saying lately, and I think it's a good nugget, is that he doesn't care about the bad or the good. It's like, I'm not going to really take this compliment to heart and just, I'm so happy they told me I'm so great. But he's also not going to take the negative. And I think that's, maybe it's healthy. I don't know. But just to not care what people think, I think is a blessing for some. I think if you lack self-awareness, it could probably be a definite curse, because then it's like, you might.
Yeah, maybe he cares, but he doesn't let it actually change the way he views himself, the way he thinks. So that's a circumstance, right? In that same model, Brooks, like, whatever you say about me, I cannot control. It's circumstantial. It's a fact that you said you don't respect me or you do respect me. And I don't want to give away my power and my result by saying like I can only do well if you tell me this. We do that in relationships all the time. I'd only be happy if my spouse would just say this to me more often or not do that. It's like, well, you're at you have no power.
Yeah.
What if instead you could say, you know what? If my spouse does this, it's because he or she is going through a hard time, or because he or she is just awesome and loves me. But like, I know what I'm capable of doing, and I just need to focus on that. And it's just it produces different results. It's amazing. It really is.
Yeah. Awesome. So what's next for you? What's the future look like for you?
So I have I think probably 12 or 14 clients right now. Not 13, apparently, 12 or 14. But I would like to get to probably about 20. So I'm still searching for people that I think are really open and willing to like try to reach for something they haven't yet.
Yeah.
People I would be excited to support. So I have my efforts in finding those people. I'm also trying to get ready probably within the next week or two. I'm going to be launching a new little video series called Coach Rock, which is, I think you alluded to earlier. Cool. So I'm going to do that with my brother. I'm excited. We'll just feature a lyric from a fun, it could be a Van Halen song. It could be a Peter the Lion song. It could be anything. Claude Debussy. I guess that wouldn't be rock.
Marilyn Manson.
And he doesn't have lyrics, but yeah, probably won't be any Marilyn Manson. I'm not familiar enough, but probably a good guy. Anyway, so that's something that's fun. Cool. And then I've got a dream that I just want to, like, when I've seen some of these people that aren't even physicians, but they're getting involved in trying to solve COVID.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool. And I want to ask myself, what are my talents? How could they lend themselves to solving big problems for the world?
Yeah.
Because it's not like I just want to be famous, but like I do want to be someone who knows they are bringing value to as many people as possible. And if that is behind the scenes, great. If it's not, great. But like, what can I do to start helping solve big problems and just kind of play bigger that way?
Sure.
So that's my other thing I want to get involved in and see how I can help. And it might start at just a community level. I just want to help people and feel like I'm doing my part.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your website, LinkedIn, whatever? How do we get a hold of you?
Sure. I do have a website, greentreecoaching.com. But I always offer a free 2-hour session. All my sessions with clients are 2 hours because it takes us a while to really open up. So it's usually twice a month, but I encourage anyone, if you're interested or know of someone, just send me an email or you can do a contact form on the website. But yeah, Weston at greentreecoaching.com, and we'll book it and just talk, just see what you want to do, because I'm all ears. And it's really nice to have someone who's just, like you said, my whole career is just based on listening and really caring about you and focusing on you. We don't get that all the time.
That's right. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
I had a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to shout out to another friend and neighbor, Jeremy Igo, for helping produce and set this thing up. So CarolinaHuddle.com, you can go check that out. And it's all the best Carolina Panthers news. And then, of course, the sponsor, my company, Atlas Technology Solutions, the best, in my opinion, Apple managed service provider in the Southeast. So check it out, atlascarolina.com. Weston, I'd love to have you come back and talk more. I really appreciate your time. And it's been awesome.
You too. You do a great job. And anyone who's new to the podcast, keep listening. And if you need IT work. First day I moved in, Chad was over at my house fixing stuff just because he's the kind of guy he is. So seriously, pleasure to be part of this.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Have a good one.